You are now tuned in to the fastest growing podcast on iTunes in the category of health, wealth, and inspiration. Inner Success Radio Podcast is your home for health, wealth, and inspiring conversations. Interact with the host and receive your free gift as a new subscriber at www.innersuccessradio.com. Put some respect on the Inner Success podcast name. Put some respect on it. Put some respect on it. Respect.
And welcome back to another exciting episode of Inner Success Radio. This is Chuck and Demetrius back for another exciting show. We air every Wednesday. You can find us on iHeart, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, and also if you have any questions or any comments, you can see us on Facebook at Inner Success Radio. Demetrius, what's going on, man? How you doing?
Oh, man, we are back again. We done tried to record this interview, and we went through a lot of adversity. So you think this time is going to work out, man?
I'm 100% sure.
All right. Well, yeah, I mean, other than that, man, I'm excited. I was excited the first time we did this, and I don't think if it wasn't for the support of our listeners and, you know, them just rooting us on to be, you know, more and more successful, you know, if they only knew what we had to go through just to get back to this position right here, I think they'll be really excited to know that we put in that effort. What do you think about that, man?
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%, man. And, you know, let's go ahead and jump right into it. And, Elizabeth, welcome to Inner Success Radio. It's good to talk to you again.
It's a wonderful pleasure.
Perfect. Thank you. And before we get into the interview, though, Elizabeth, Demetrius, sir, go ahead and take us away with the question of the day.
All right. So here we go. All right. So the question of the day, I heard it today, and I guess I'll throw it out there to you guys. Here it is. Hold on. All right, here it is. It's by a gentleman. It's actually a quote, and I just want to hear you guys' take on it. It's by a gentleman named Michael Korda, and he says the quote is, "In order to succeed, we must first believe that we can." All right, and for those of you that are on the treadmill, listening to us at the gym, as well as for those of you who always listen to us on your way to work, again, the quote is, "In order to succeed, we must first believe that we can." What do you think? What's your take on that quote there, Charles?
Well, to me, it means, you know, belief plays a major part in somebody achieving any level of success. It's actually funny as you're reading this quote. I read a quote. I came across that quote earlier. I mean, I've heard it before, but it came up today again by Theodore Roosevelt. He says, "If you believe you can, you're halfway there." So that's a major part of the success equation, is making sure that that belief is there and in place.
Wow, that is really dope. And Theodore Roosevelt, yeah, that's a big name. I believe he's one of the only people that I've ever heard of. He read one book every single day, like a full book every single day. That's really powerful. So shout out to you, as well as you know, your take on the question of the day. And we're going to pass it over to you, Elizabeth. Again, the quote is, "In order to succeed, we must first believe that we can." What does that quote mean to you?
You know what, I agree with both of you, and I would add, for a lot of people, in order to believe that they can, they need to be inspired to believe that they can. And what inspires most people to believe in themselves and they can achieve what they so desire is to be inspired by, hey, people like you, people who are already achieving. And that is what gives them the impetus to move forward. All through human life and all through our lives, we need to be motivated and inspired constantly. And that's why people read books. That's why Theodore Roosevelt kept reading over and over. He needed to be inspired. And that's what kept him going. We forget that principle. And by our lives, the goodness of our lives, the caring of our lives as consecrated people, that's what inspires other people to keep on going. So it's a part, it's two things. We have to believe in ourselves, but all of us need to be motivated to believe in ourselves and also to overcome our story. If it has been a story of deprivation and of suffering. So that's why we have radio podcasts such as yours, Inner Success. The big word isn't success. The big word is inner, and that's what you guys are talking about.
Wow, so I love that. All right, so it's an inside job. And I think that's the first time anybody came on our podcast and said the most important word in our radio broadcast is the inner part. So that would, we'll definitely take that. I like it. And, for me, in order to succeed, we must first believe that we can. I could go over a million different things. I love what both of you guys just shared, and I think I'll just leave it at that because I know we got to get into this interview. However, just in short, if anybody knows about the story of how the Brooklyn Bridge came to fruition,
tell us.
You know exactly what I mean. Now, I don't want to tell it now. But in short, what I'll say, Elizabeth, and I actually have a SoundCloud audio that explains everything. If you want to see it, you could check Billionaire Brown online or Rich Before 30 on SoundCloud. I explained the whole story, but if you want to really look at it in short, just Google how the Brooklyn Bridge came to fruition, and it really shows and exemplifies the power of if you believe something, once you believe it, like inside, like Elizabeth talking about the inner part, once you believe it, anything is possible. A powerful, fascinating story of how the Brooklyn Bridge was actually designed, created, and, what it is today. So with that being said, let's pass it over to Charles so we can go ahead and get this thing started.
Awesome. And so, Demetrius, I'll link to that audio in the show notes so people listening in can have easy access to it. Because I'm going to actually, once we finish up, I'm going to actually listen to myself because I'm pretty interested in it as well. So, thanks for sharing that, and Elizabeth, thank you for sharing as well. So, Elizabeth, one of the things we're always interested in when we bring a guest on the show is a person's journey, how you ended up on your path. And tell us a little bit about that and also a little bit about the work that you currently do.
That's like 10 questions in one. And that's why you're so good at what you do. I was also thinking deeply about Demetrius and Charles and your response. And to that question it comes from the belief that we can do it. And you know who has that mostly? Our little children. They don't know they can't do it, so they do it. They accomplish playing games because they believe they can do it. And I feel that my story of I can do it throughout my life started, in depth when I was 8 years old and was abandoned with my twin sister. And we were warehoused in an orphanage for a few years, and beginning at the age of 8. That's when, although I was 8 years old, I grew very old very fast because I entered into a world of suffering where children were abandoned as we were, and they were suffering children who had been placed there by the courts. Some had psychiatric problems. But it was a foreign world. It was like us going into maybe Syria in a different type of way, where everything is new and everything is foreign and everything is fearful. And I feel from that experience, it led me into a huge life of that also was full as a nun. When I was 15 years old in high school, my sister and I were track stars, and we were training. We we did the 100 meter, 200 meter, 400 meter. We were sprinters, and we had the great ideals of being Olympic stars. And then somehow, when so many of my fellow friends in high school came to me with problems with drugs and pregnancy and abuse, I said to myself, there has to be a better life for me than just being a runner. And that's when I joined very strict order. It was a monastic order that had many hours of prayer and silence and sacrifice. And we also had the radical life of working among the poor alone, no less. And I was trained as a young girl at 15, 16 in the streets of Harlem. And what was very interesting is because I was an athlete, I had no sense of fear. And that, I think, saved me in many situations because people will take advantage of you if they're in a bad place, knowing that you're fearful. So I learned, I remember this one dear nun who was training me. And she said to me, you can't preach to these people about the love of God. And I said, well, why not? And she said, they need food. They need clothing. And let's do that. And when we do that, we won't have to preach about God. Wow. It was my introduction to a new life that I continued for many years.
Wow. Yeah, and that's really important, and that's good, you know, and I like how the way she worded that, because, you know, people will usually pay attention more so towards your actions than what you say.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you're preaching to God and you're preaching the Word of God, but your actions speak differently, then that's going to speak volumes. But if you're actually putting in the work through action, and like she was right, you don't have to sing because they'll see God through your actions.
Right. And, you know, that way we're true. We're not a bunch of phonies. No matter what we do, I think what I strive to do is to live from a sense of integrity, and also from a sense of gratitude. Like we were sometimes discussing homelessness, and here and even in Santa Barbara, many of the homeless individuals are veterans. It breaks my heart. Mm-hmm. It breaks my heart. On and on. That so many of our beautiful young men have ended up on the streets. That's why when I say, but for the grace of God, there I go. And that's why I guess my whole life, since I was 8 years old, I wanted to be part of service, to be a consecrated person in love and devotion and helping people the best I can, even you know, past psychiatry, past, you know, having a private practice, by even, you know, the simple act of being an author, writing fiction and nonfiction, just so in some way I could touch someone somewhere that they would read and be inspired. You know what? I think through life, through our life, we need constant motivation. And I was thinking about you guys, and I was thinking about young men, and I remember going to a party, and this young man turned 30, and this is what he told me afterwards. Turning 30 was a real punch in the gut because I knew I had to grow up. And for women, often it is, hey, I don't want to waste my time. So the process of life is always growing up. We're always growing. And then, when we stop growing, then we stagnate. And then we die from hopelessness.
Wow. And, you know, I think I mentioned this to you when we was previously recording, but I know I'm not the only person that, you know, wanted to know this. So, yeah, you shared the answer with me. However, I do want to make sure that our listeners know how you felt about this as well. You mentioned that, you know, at 8 years old, you started living in an orphanage, and I have a business partner that I work with out in South Jersey, an elderly woman, and she had to give her children up at a very young age. And for many years, for most of my life, I always just looked at it from the child's perspective. However, through meeting this lady and her feeling comfortable to share her story with me and a couple other of my partners, we come to find that we never thought about the parent who has to make that decision to give up their child. And she's happy even to this day, like that was one of the best things I could do for my child.
Yes, I agree with that.
We want to know, like, how did you, at what age did you see your mother's side of making that decision as opposed to just yours?
Oh, guess what? Hey, we didn't find out exactly what happened, my sister and I, till we were in our 30s, man. And what went down was that my mother married, she was a widow, she married, and her new husband did not want us, and did not want us in his family, and that's why she put us in an orphanage.
Wow.
However, having said that, I know of many dear women who were forced to because of their deprivation, of suffering, of poverty in their family, that they had to give up their child, and they did the best they could. And today, it's so awesome. So many children are able to find their dear mothers. I cry every time. And they're joined together, and siblings are joined together again. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. So who are we to judge? Even with my mother, that she did that. And then I know in her heart she felt bad about it years after. She never discussed it with me. But one of the greatest joys that I've had, despite many accomplishments through my life, was in the last years of my mother's life to care for her and make sure that she was treated as God Almighty. And that gives me so much joy, you guys. So I'm always learning.
All right, that's really good. And I also wanted to ask you, I'm a man of a million mistakes, and some people see it as my Yeah, but some people just have this. I posted on my Facebook page last week. I said, it's that awkward moment when people want you to be perfect, but you can't. You know what I mean? And it seems like the less people do with their lives, the more time and the more things that they want you to be perfect with. But it sounds like most of us do know, it takes mistakes to reach, a high level in life. Now, here's my question. The reason why I was talking about perfection, before you rudely interrupted me, Elizabeth, here's my question.
You're funny.
I always had this perception of nuns, right? Because you mentioned that you were a nun. I always had this perception of a nun. The only thing that I knew about nuns was what I saw from the movie Sister Act, right? Really great movie. However, I also know other little things like nuns don't have sex, but when you see a nun, for me, I just think of perfection, like they don't do anything wrong. What are some things that people like me who are uneducated about nuns and what they do, like what are some of the beliefs that you guys have that people like me should probably know?
I think one of the illusions is, first of all, beginning with the word, and it's an illusionary word. The word perfect or perfection really doesn't exist in human life, and it's been misconstrued from the Greek word perfectio. A better word is excellent. But let me answer your question. If you're alive, you're going to make so-called mistakes. If you're not alive, you're not making mistakes. The life of nuns is a consecrated life striving for excellence. They strive to love God with their whole being. They strive to serve and help their fellow human beings as doctors, nurses, social workers, teachers, on and on. It's striving. It doesn't mean that they have arrived, but they have a life of striving and always trying to do their best. they live together in a community to achieve that, so they don't have so-called the distractions of married life, so they take the vow of chastity and poverty, chastity, and obedience. But the big one is giving up family and giving up a relationship with their spouse. So that's what they strive to do. They have all the stuff that goes on with families. They get jealous, they get angry, they have all that stuff going on, you know. So it's an illusion to believe that their life is sterile and with a very bad word I call perfection. It's a life of striving to do their best.
Wow.
Now, Elizabeth, when you went into the
is
ministry,
this for me, Chris?
This is Charles.
Oh, Charles. Okay.
Yeah.
That's the other good-looking guy.
Oh, I bet you both. Okay.
When you went into the ministry, and I'm asking this because sometimes people will say, "Well, this is God's calling on my life." You know, I feel I'm being called towards this. Do you feel that was something that you had to do, or did you want to go into the ministry? Or was it a combination of the two?
Yeah, want to. Definitely. It's very hard to feel that you're forced into it, and if you are, you're not going to stay around, and you're going to suffer psychiatrically if you have those delusions. It's a desire, definitely, to do better. That was my desire, to help people and to have a relationship with the divine spirit as best I could. I failed all the time, believe me. You have these great ideals to strive for, which is really often an act of insanity. The best thing to do, even through life, no matter what you do, is to strive to do your best, to acknowledge your faults, to be willing to say, "Hey, I'm sorry. So I was a jerk. I'm sorry." But not to say sorry without the intention to do better. If you just flip off, say, "Oh, I'm sorry," and you don't mean it, it's a hypocritical state of mind. So as nuns, they try to strive to be their best, like most of us.
Yeah. Now, you entered the ministry at a very young age.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure, I mean, we have the people who are listening to our show come from all different ages. But for a person listening in right now who wants to get into the ministry, me personally, I believe that there should be a certain age or a certain amount of life experience a person should go through before they get into ministry.
Absolutely.
Do you agree with that sentence? Okay, I was going to say, do you agree with that sentiment, or do you feel that you entered the ministry too young, or you felt as if looking back that it happened as it was supposed to?
You know what? I'll tell you quite frankly, I don't judge myself as being too young. I was what I was, and I had the desire at that time. Although age-wise, it was extremely young, but in many ways I was an old person. You know, I think the orphanage really matured me. Even as a child, my mother having a nervous breakdown matured me, where I became the mother in the family. Relationships within the family matured me. It was unusual. But today, people becoming nuns and priests, they want them to be mature, usually to have a college background. They want college-educated people because by that time they're 21, 22, and also a worldly experience, maybe working in corporation, having their business, knowing what they're doing completely. Today is a very challenging time. Way back in the day, hey, it was a different life, a different generation. But today that is really frowned upon, to have very young people enter without worldly experience.
All right. Now, here's I got a question for you. Well, maybe not a question. I would like to hear your take on it. I know you're an entrepreneur. You're work career is pretty extensive. It's pretty much predictable. If you can help people, Elizabeth has done it probably, right? If it's doing good for the world, she's done it. From social worker, internal affairs investigator, drug rehabilitation clinics, probation officer, private counseling practice, writer, published author, which is, I like the writer and published author. I do have a question I want to touch on with that. However, I was just reading a book. I just finished reading a book. It's called Staying Up When Your Job Pulls You Down. And it's really based around, these three things that these authors, Joanna Bodner and Venda Ray Johnson, feel that we all need in our workplace. Whether we're working a job or we're entrepreneurs, we need to have these three things. And they call it respect, responsibility, and recognition. Respect, responsibility, and recognition. As a motivating lecturer, as an author, right? Do you believe those three things to be true, that we do need that to be performing and be effective in the workplace?
I do believe that respect begins with ourselves. You have to respect yourself and be responsible for your life. You're not going to get that from Charles or Demetrius or from my husband. It comes within yourself. If you don't respect yourself, you're not going to respect those you love. If you're not responsible for yourself in your life, day by day, hey, you're not going to get it from reading a book. You will be inspired by reading a book. But it comes down to the nitty-gritty yourself. Recognition, now, I disagree with that big time. Unless you are recognizing yourself as being good and doing your best. If you're trying to get recognition from the world and from other people around you, man, you're going to have a world of suffering, if I understand you right. You want to clarify that?
Yeah, I sure will. Here's an example. There's this lady named Carolyn in the book, right? And Carolyn, she was just an employee, and she had a supervisor, and for year after year after year, her supervisor would bring her in. They would have these meetings, these mastermind meetings. She would give out all these great ideas, right? Carolyn would give these great ideas. And then her supervisor would take those ideas, and he would go to his management and say, hey, guys, I got this great idea. We need to do this. Year after year after year, this guy kept getting promoted, and he never said anything about Carolyn was the person who was helping. Now, other employees knew it was Carolyn because they were in the meeting.
Yes.
So that's when you talk about recognition. This is in a job place, not as an entrepreneur in the workforce. So that was if you wanted the example.
That's a good example because I hate to say it, but it's very common. It's so common, it's unbelievable, but it's very common. So how does a person deal with that? There's many ways to deal with that, and I certainly don't have the answers. But one is a question I would pose to someone is it making you intensely unhappy every day? Do you have an option to go to another job? Do you have an option to create your own business? Without options, we despair. We certainly do. We have to have options if we don't want to go down the dark road. And so with this person, if I were working with him or her, I would certainly say, how does it make you feel, and why do you want to put up with this long?
Wow. Yeah, and Carolyn, she eventually figured out how to, work that out. But definitely, if anybody wants to read it, it's called Staying Up When Your Job Pulls You Down, and the author is Joanne Bodner and Venda Ray Johnson. My second question for you, Elizabeth, is, like I just mentioned, you're currently a motivational lecturer. I'm on your website right now. You're a writer as well as a motivational lecturer. I'm a big advocate of, Les Brown, the #1 motivational speaker in the world. He likes to say that even a motivator needs a motivator, right? So here you are as a writer, and also as a motivational lecturer. Would you share with Charles and I, as well as our listeners, like, who do you turn to? You know, where do you go for inspiration?
You know, through my life, we need someone to talk to. It comes down to that. Even as being a confessor, it comes down to who can I talk to that I trust and respect. And for me, often a level of achievement, but not necessarily, they could be a hermit, and that's an achievement, believe me. So throughout my life, I've always had people that I've looked up to and that I respect and who give me wise counsel. And one of the wise counsels was that, you know, because I was in the orphanage, I always have had to deal with a sense of fear of tomorrow because I would always be begging my mother to take us home. And when is that going to happen? And so the fear of the future was a boogeyman. And as a result of having that fear, I had to deal with it. And I was talking to a very wise man who is a holy man and a healer from India. And I said, I have this fear. What can I do about it? You know, sometimes it seems overwhelming. Sometimes it comes out from anywhere, from some dark place. And he said to me, you've happened to have managed all your yesterdays, and you're managing talking to me. What is there to fear about tomorrow? And so that bit of wisdom helps me. And I know that I will always have someone to talk to, even in podcasts such as yours. Sharing your insights help me. And it helps a lot of people, not just the people that you are interviewing. And so when I wrote my book, Exuberant Women Don't Age, No Time to Waste, I was thinking, hey, I don't want to age and shrivel up. And there's a way not to, and it has to do with our spirit of exuberance and what we talked about originally, that we can do it. We can move forward. And as I said before, we need always to be grateful. No matter how tough life is, if other people could do it, we can do it. But most of all, looking around, seeing what's happening in the world and how bad off children are, and to be grateful that we could even lift our foot. Many soldiers can't do that anymore. That we have eyes and ears and we can taste food. You know what? Sometimes I go through an exercise with my body of everything. I'm happy about my body. Then I go to my mind. And the last thing I go to is my accomplishments. That's how I live my life.
I love it.
Nice. So it sounds like it all starts with gratitude. You know, it sometimes it's tough when people are going through a particular experience. You know, I've been there plenty of times where, you know, it's hard to focus on the things that you already have when there's so much going on. But even if you do the smallest thing, like I think one morning I woke up, I was just going through so much. I said, you know, thank you for, you know, allowing me to wake up in a warm bed. Like something as small as that. And what happens is it eventually accumulates, right? And then you'll start, your mindset will start shifting towards those little things, right? And then eventually it'll get bigger and bigger and bigger. Before you know it, you'll realize, wow, you're surrounded by so many blessings.
Oh man, you said it.
It'd be mind-boggling.
You know, a warm bed that you can even breathe, you know, God. And then you know what happens when your life and your mind is filled with gratitude. It snuffs out crap. It snuffs out a bunch of stuff that shrivels you up. That's why gratitude, they say, gratitude is the face of love. It's the heartbeat of love. You can't love without gratitude, man. You just can't do it. It's filled with love. And then your mind becomes more free. And all the stuff that doesn't matter. You know, when I was a nun, I used to hate this. I was just a young kid, so vibrant. And they said, How about thinking about your death? I said, are you serious? I was 16. I want to think about death. No way, Jose. But it was an exercise that all things are passing. And in the end, when you were born to die. And get a grip on what is happening moment by moment, day by day. And that helps us to be in the present.
That's big. Yeah, that's big. And I highly encourage everybody to get some type of gratitude journal. I have this, what they call a 5-minute journal. And each day it asks 4 questions. And you just answer the questions. And at the end of the day, it's like a follow-up to, what did you achieve? What 3 things that were great that happened today? And then the last question to ask is, what would have made today even better?
And that's beautiful. And that's beautiful. And then when we were in a convent, and I've carried it on through my life, is at noontime, they would ring these bells, and you would focus for 1 or 2 minutes on how you had conducted yourself from rising into that moment. It only takes 2 or 3 minutes. I suggest everybody does it. And then when you go, then at the end of the day, hey, just 2 or 3 minutes, just as you said, what am I grateful for and could I have improved? And then, hey, give yourself a kiss, meaning that kiss your heart and mind that you're alive and you're doing good. You're doing the best you can. And forget the word perfect and perfection. The better word is I'm doing and striving to do my best, and my best will become better day by day.
Man, this is good. I still think that I like when you first started this out and you was talking about the name of the podcast, and you said, the most powerful thing in our title is inner, right? It's
Absolutely.
An inside job. You started it out this way, and that was your last comment about, it's really an inside job, right? So my last question before we move forward is, as a motivational lecturer, where in the world are you right now?
In Santa Barbara, California.
Okay, you're in Santa Barbara, California. So you're in the United States. You're a motivational lecturer. If you can put on your motivational lecturer, your hat just for a second. We just had a presidential election year. Donald Trump is the presidential elect, all right? And there's a lot of people that are frustrated, right? There's a lot of people who are in my opinion, are lingering on in their frustration and anger a little bit too long.
Yeah.
Like they're carrying this frustration and they're not going to support and they're not going to do this and they're just going against for the same reason that they hated this guy for being hateful to other people. They're being hateful to him and it's being justifiable. They're justifying it. My question for you before my closing remarks is, how long is too long for us to sulk in a negative, frustrating way about this next 4 years? How long is too long?
As long as your next breath. That's how long.
I love it. Thank you for putting on your motivational lecturer hat. I love that answer. I absolutely love that answer. My closing remarks is this. When we recorded this previously, you referenced the show Shark Tank, right? And you was talking about how that's it's a great example. It's a great learning experience for entrepreneurs and just life in itself. And what I was saying that I noticed about that show Shark Tank, although I haven't binge watched it and I haven't seen every episode, the ones that I've seen a lot of it. I've seen a lot of people get deals that didn't have the greatest product, but they had an incredible story. Yeah. And I also seen a lot of those same scenarios on that Shark Tank show where they actually, all of the sharks told them, no, I don't want it, we don't want it, get out of here. And I've also seen them close that door, walk through the door, close the door, give their losing, at the end, the camera comes in and they say,
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how they didn't get it. I really thought Damon was going to get it, blah, 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 blah. And I've seen them go out, open that door up, and say, you know what, because of your story, I want to give you a shot. I say all of that in my closing remarks to say this, and I'm going to say this on behalf of Charles and myself, because I know Charles believes in this 100% as well. Your story that you've shared with us here on this podcast, from being in an orphanage to also forgiving and understanding the decision that your mother made, even though you found out when you was about 30 years old or after 30, you and your twin sister. You also told us on the previous podcast, I'm going to throw this in also, one of the greatest accomplishments that you count in your life to date is having the opportunity to take care of your mother when she was passing, when she was dying. You've also been a nun, right? You've been a nun. You're no longer a nun, and you've experienced a whole bunch of experience. And I'll tell you this, Elizabeth, we've had, I don't know how many guests on this show. But your story is an amazing story that we are going to make sure that we do our best to get your story out, because we're 100% sure your story is going to help the life of somebody else that's listening to this podcast. So that's my closing remarks. We loved your story, and I'm going to pass it over to Charles so he can get us out of here.
Thank you.
Elizabeth,
Yes.
Thanks so much for coming on and sharing with us. And I wholeheartedly agree with Demetrius. Your story is very, very inspirational. And I know people who are going to listen to this, people who are listening to this right now, are getting a benefit from it as well. Just let our listeners know where we can find you, website, email, social media. Let us know how we can get a hold of you.
The best way to get a hold of me, I have a Facebook and homepage, but you can get most of this information right on Amazon.com with all my books. Exuberant Women Don't Age is one book. Another one is At Home Among Sinners. You can see all my books. And also you could order them from any reputable bookstore, and you could contact me personally through my Facebook and or my homepage. And I want to say it's been a real privilege to be on your program, Inner Success, because this is a beautiful service. And I feel it would be an honor for me to meet Charles and Demetrius, but somehow or other I feel I've met your heart. And thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth, again, for coming on. And we'll have links to all of your information in the show notes, so that way people can have easy access to it. And of course, when the show goes live, we'll be sure to post it, as Demetrius said, all over our social media, because we definitely want to get your message out there. I have one final question / scenario for you. Knowing what you know now, Elizabeth, what's one thing you wish you would have known when you first entered the ministry at that young age?
This may surprise you, but nothing. I went with a full heart, I went with innocence, and I went with an aspiration to be my best. I have no regrets. And there's nothing that I wish I knew, honestly, because I understand that life is a process, and it was my process, my journey. I don't judge it. It is what it is. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the hard times, and I'm grateful for my suffering, and I'm grateful for the inspiration that you continue to do in your program.
Perfect. Awesome. And that's how we grow. So thanks so much, Elizabeth, again. Everybody listening in, just be sure to check us out on iHeartRadio. We're on iTunes as well. You can have it to InnerSuccessRadio.com. Be sure to subscribe. We're giving away a free 30-minute interview with multimillionaire Jerry Clark. If you have any comments or you have any questions, be sure to hit us up on Facebook at Inner Success Radio. And until next episode, we'll talk to you then. Bye for now.
Thank you.